Hello, my fellow nerds. I've seen a lot of people in the autistic community complain about autistic representation in media, and understandably so. Yet, I haven't seen much advice for people on how to do it well other than just hire autistic people. Well, just as you don't have to be gay to write a gay character or a woman to write a female character, you don't have to be autistic to write an autistic character. It helps, of course, but it's not forbidden to write one. So, as someone who is on the spectrum, I am here to help you if you are a not autistic person who wants to write one of us. I'm going to put up a big disclaimer for this video. I am on the autism spectrum, but I do not speak for everyone. All of us are different and have very different experiences, which is what makes writing an autistic character so hard. I have what people used to call Asperger's, but I guess now it's merged with ASD, so I guess I'm officially autistic now, even though I still feel like it should be separate because I don't go through the same struggles most of my traditionally autistic peers go through. I mean, I can mask better, I face less backlash in society, I get called the R word a lot less, so I'm going to keep calling it Asperger's until it gets a new title. On that note, I apologize in advance for any language that you may not agree with. I don't really interact much with the part of the community that tells me what language is in and what language is out. I'm not here to tell you how you should refer to us or whatever because I don't know that stuff, and personally, I don't care. Another thing, I'm going to be talking about the less severe end of the spectrum. I don't know what it's like to have CDD or Reds. I only know my experience. Also, please don't use this video to diagnose yourself. Alright, with that out of the way, let's write some autistic people. When it comes to autistic people, what you need to know is that we're just like everyone else. But we are all very different from each other and exhibit vastly different traits. That is why they call it a spectrum. These traits are best exemplified on Matt Lowry's spectrum. This is a chart that I actually really like. We can have some, a lot, or only a few of these, and experience them at very different intensities. Some neurotypical people may even have one or two of these. And this wheel, my friends, is what you are going to use to write your autistic character. But before you go nuts into going into every little part of this chart, let me go over some don'ts when it comes to writing autistic people. It is always a good idea to learn from what not to do, especially when it comes to writing autism. Don't over-exaggerate symptoms. When writing autism, do it subtly. Less is more. The bad representation is often criticized because it is over-exaggerated. You will never hear anyone complain about someone pulling a J.K. Rowling and going, "Psst, hey, this character's been autistic all along." Because some of the best autistic characters were often never planned to be autistic in the first place. Marcy Wu from Amphibia shows that many of the best autistic characters are normally not written with autism in mind. Basically, many people in the fandom just made the autism connection and the author just said, sure. It's subtle, but you can definitely tell it's there. It's a part of her, but it isn't the entire focus of every single scene she's in. If you exaggerate something and it's not a parody, people may think you're mocking them. Unless you're talking about someone who's really far on the other end of the spectrum, the majority of us either mostly act neurotypical or get really good at masking. Now, a lot of you guys have probably heard the word masking a lot, so I'm going to get into it. It is one of the most important traits that I need to talk about today, and the reason why you may never know that someone is autistic unless they tell you. Masking is a mechanism that some autistic people use to appear more neurotypical and be accepted in society. I got good at it through experience. You don't just wake up one day and suddenly become a master at hiding your autism. You build it up over time. I built it through the following: mimicking how other people behave, which is how most people do it, and can also be to your detriment if you mimic the wrong people, which is what happened to me. Going to anime conventions and then copying the fragments of my confident and leaderly behavior that I developed into other situations. Due to the origins of this channel, I was kind of put into like a leadership position within the fandom. And so when I would go to conventions, sometimes I would get recognized, and a lot of the times I ended up having to lead a lot of the photo shoots. And then suddenly I got shoved into this leaderly position, and I had never had that before. So I took the confidence of whenever I talked about my special interests and applied it to situations where normally I'm not as confident. And then there was being dragged into neurotypical interactions by my parents and using a combination of copying that confidence and mimicking those around me. Masking can make you an autism ninja, but at the end of the day, it can be emotionally draining and exhausting. It takes me 30 minutes to an hour of just sitting there and resting when I get home from work just because I'm mentally drained. Therefore, if someone doesn't look or act autistic, there's a chance that they're just really good at hiding it. If you're not autistic and you've never written an autistic character before, I suggest you start on this side of the spectrum before going down any further. Start with writing an Aspie and then you can get to the nonverbals, lest you be accused of mocking the community. Music, come on, get out here. Now, before I get into this, music is really hard to talk about because, well, it's about a level 3 autistic character rather than a level 1. Do people still use levels? I don't know, I'm just gonna use it anyways. I'm not nonverbal, and it's hard to compare music to other media because very rarely do we see autism representation beyond level 1. And when it does exist, it's rarely ever good. Like this movie. Autism is a spectrum. On the same spectrum as Asperger's, you have CDD, which is something that is very, very different. And I'm not saying, oh, it tried, so I guess it gets a pass. No. There is so much wrong with this movie, from the bright lights and sounds, to the restraints, to the casting, and there are plenty of non-autism things wrong with this film too. My point is, I'm not going to talk about my personal feelings about it because I don't think I have the right to be offended by this, because this clearly is not supposed to represent me. And it never was. That being said, one of the reasons why many people cringed and felt that this was so offensive is that music's symptoms are way over-exaggerated here. I think the movie would have been a lot more bearable if she cut out the exaggerated facial expressions. Instantly would have made it better, and the backlash would not nearly have been as severe. Also, we're not like superheroes how we could hear things from a couple doors away. It's more like we don't have a filter for smaller stimuli. If we were to point out that person chewing loudly, you'd probably hear it too. But your brain can filter out that person's chewing automatically, or the uncomfortable hem in your clothes. Ours, less so. It's less of a super hearing thing and more that we can't turn off the background noise and the insignificant sounds, so it's everything all at once. We are perceiving the same thing, but my brain can't handle the stimulus that it is given. Don't read from a textbook. Remember that chart I showed you? Well, whatever you do, do not use all of it. Do not go down a checklist of autism symptoms trying to collect them like Pokemon cards. Just sprinkle in a few of these traits and that will be enough. If there's anything you take away from this video, less is more. As I said before, the best autistic characters were not even originally written with autism in mind, and this is what we want to see. As another autistic friend of mine put it, a lot of autistic representation tries to be too accurate, and they end up making a character whose personality traits are just copy-pasted DSM symptoms. Basically, their view of autism comes entirely from reading psychology textbooks and not from actually interacting with people on the spectrum. This is one of the most common and most damning mistakes I see when it comes to bad autistic representation. Autistic people are very different from one another. Different symptoms, views, opinions, ways of communication. We can't even agree on what to call each other. You cannot categorize us all. Instead, talk to one of your autistic friends or go on Reddit forums if you don't have any autistic friends. Reddit is your best friend when it comes to writing. Remember, always write from experience, even if it's someone else's. A good example would be Jun Chen from The Ghost and Molly McGee. One of you guys actually recommended this to me. She's very clearly and explicitly autistic, but there's only a couple things there. She isn't riddled with every autism trait in the book. Meanwhile, music, get back here, we're not done talking about you. This movie was a prime example of Googling all of your research and not using anecdotes like a writer should. I could see that they were checking off a list of every single autistic symptom as I trudged through this movie. It's just all too much in one autistic body. I have some of the same stims that music does, but they don't just all come at me at once like it's some kind of stim salad. My body isn't in autism mode 24/7. It's like writing someone who's on her period and putting in every single symptoms of periods that you could possibly think of. That poor character is going to die. It's all so much and so unnecessary. Don't write autistic traits from a neurotypical point of view. Another key to writing autistic people is to not write it from how an outsider views it. Write what's happening from how the autistic person is experiencing things first, and then translate it over to whoever's point of view that you need. It's the same as writing any other character. You know what's coming. You need motivation. Don't just have us do things for no reason. Give the character's actions motivations. We are not stupid. We have motivation behind everything that we do, just like any other person. That motivation, though, may not be our intent or what we want to do, but it's still a cause. It's still a motivation, but it's just not ours. If we make an involuntary motion, that's still caused by something in the brain and should be treated as such. If I just start rolling my eyes out of nowhere, it's not going to have the same impact as me feeling the stim coming on, trying my best not to look rude, and then doing it, and then feeling guilty and paranoid afterwards. You see how adding motivation can instantly make things feel less fake or forced? Also, you have reactions from that character. Feelings. You make that person a person instead of a walking, talking stimbot. A great example is Quinny from Heartbreak High. This is probably the best autistic representation I've ever seen, likely because she was played by an actual autistic girl. We can see the things that lead up to her putting her headphones on or her meltdowns. As a result, they feel very real, and we can see her anguish. We can see her struggle. The Good Doctor has been recommended to me several times as what not to do. Most people are tired of the savant role, and the I am a surgeon clip has been memed all to hell at this point. Also, why does he look like a robot here? Like, the shoulder bunching I get, but bro looks like he's trying way too hard here. Let's also look at music's meltdown scene. It feels like it just comes out of nowhere. What is causing the meltdown in this scene? Translating it to another point of view, instead we'd see first maybe annoyance or discomfort by whatever is going on, maybe a look of panic on her face, music trying to hold back tears, and then maybe the scene. It can all be very fast, but the small details like that can make a big difference in your writing. Again, it all comes down to motivation. Also, the scene with the gum made me cringe so hard. Like, I think even low-functioning autistic people know not to eat gum off the street. You don't see the motivation behind what she does, she just does it. That's why it comes off as off-putting rather than realistic. That was a moment where I really took a step back and I was like, yeah, this is bad. This is also how I know that most people who criticized music never actually watched it. Because if they did, they would have definitely said something about this scene. That and the bee scene. Like, if music was allergic to bees, she would remember that and not try to hold a bee? Music here is written like she's just stupid, even though non-verbal people can write things like this. Which brings me to my next point. Don't infantilize us. This is a huge complaint in the community. The majority of us tend to function well on our own. If you're going to write someone further down on the spectrum, go look up other people's experiences. And again, do not pull everything out of a textbook. Even the people that need help with daily tasks and can't speak are just like us. We're just people. People who are nonverbal just cannot physically produce speech. It is either an issue with your motor skills that keeps you from producing sounds, or it is a language impairment where your brain doesn't understand language overall. That being said, we still think like everyday people. Even when we do see Quinny getting overwhelmed, Darren doesn't treat her like a child. He treats her like a friend. Her problems are framed like any other characters. She doesn't at all appear childish in any kind of way. She appears like an everyday person. The objectification and the infantilization of music is very heavily prevalent within the film. She's treated more like an object or a pet rather than a person. And that's why it feels so off and so wrong. You can tell Maddie is trying her best to portray her emotion and her humanity to the best that she can in some of these scenes. That's one thing I actually will give her credit for. In a couple of scenes, I can actually see like some emotion, some spark of personality in her eyes. But in most scenes, she's just an object or an animal. The focus is never on her as a person unless it is an overstimulating music video that completely detracts from the plot. Don't make the entire focus of the character their autism. Avoid making jokes where the butt of it is autism. I don't mind, but I am not everyone. This is kind of a common critique that I hear. It's fine every now and then, but if this character exists just to be autism jokes, people may not think it's the best autistic representation. Look at Kyle Broflovsky. He's Jewish, and some Jewish jokes are made at his expense. But he has a character outside of that. He doesn't exist just to be a Jew. I know it's stated that he's not, but you can't deny what they originally had in mind. Honestly, I like Sheldon. Seeing him on screen was the first time I actually felt cool for being who I was. For once, my special interests were cool and not weird. And my parents stopped calling my special interests weird, and they actually started to understand me better because they loved the show. Yeah, I know they have trash taste, but it helped me in the end. The main thing that people don't like about Sheldon is that he's the butt of jokes and he's mostly used for comedy, though I personally don't care. Sheldon was seen as cool in my high school, and he made things like special interests and nerd stuff more accepted. And that is why I have a soft spot in my heart for this character. If you want to see a real example of making a character nothing but autism, look at the new Predator movie. There is nothing to this kid except that he's autistic whenever the plot demands it. And that's all I have to say about that. A good example would be Abed from the Community. When asked for good autistic representation, the most recommended example was by far Abed from the Community. He checks a lot of Aspie stereotypes, but he's portrayed as being an awesome and interesting person. He's a lot like Sheldon if they took out all the things that people have a problem with. Abed works similar to Sheldon, but is seen as a positive figure because his autism is portrayed in a way where it is not 100% seen as annoying, and it's not dunking on him for being autistic. His autism is portrayed as something cool and helpful at times and a fun part of his character, but we also see some of the struggles that he goes through, showing that it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Again, personally, I'm just happy that someone's making Aspies look cool, but I know a lot of people do care, and that's what matters. We just want to look cool for once. Don't make our entire character being a secret genius. Having autism does not make us secret geniuses. Yes, I know, shocker. I wish we were, but we aren't. However, I totally understand why people think that we are. The secret behind our geniusness is actually called hyperfocusing and special interests. Special interests, or spins, oh, that's kind of cute, are interests or hobbies that tend to overly occupy an autistic person's time, thought process, and life. If you also have ADHD, these interests will change and suddenly drop, and then you end up with a closet full of things that you lost interest over time, and it just haunts you. This entire channel was once a physical manifestation of my special interest in Hitalia. Yep, this entire channel was brought to you by autism. But to describe special interests, it's like hyper-focusing, but on an entire thing, concept, or hobby. I may not communicate well, but when someone is talking about my special interest, I can talk for hours. I have to know everything about it. I will spend hours or days researching it. I'm constantly hungry for more information about it and things surrounding it, which is how I wrote my first book. Yep, this was pure autism, baby. A special interest engages your mind. It's like a constant craving for a concept or a hobby. This is how we end up collecting stuff, knowing absolutely anything and everything about a certain topic, being really good at a specific hobby or thing. And then there's hyperfocusing. This is more of a thing with the people that have the ADHD autism combo, the double A's. Not to be confused with the triple A's who also have anxiety. Basically, when your brain gets really hooked on a certain thing, likely a special interest, it just goes from there, blocking out everything around you. The one and only thing on your mind is this thing. Everything else gets pushed to the side, even if it's something like eating, showering, or your house being on fire. You are in the zone. And then 3 hours later, you have a 15-page script on autism. You can focus on something and you are very fast and efficient at doing that thing. And if anything tries to stop you, you will not be happy. This sounds great, but often leads to us neglecting things that we actually need to do, like taking care of ourselves, our environment, work, or chores. In short, we're not secret geniuses, we're just very passionate about the things that we like and tend to remember cool but useless information. We can be geniuses in a specific field or hobby, but likely because we are hyper-fixating on it or it's one of our special interests. You can see this in Abed from the community. He's not a genius in every single thing. He just has expertise in his special interests. A bad example, again, Predator. The next level of evolution thing, you can tell that these writers have never actually talked to an autistic person. Definitely not the next level of evolution. I would love not to roll my eyes in public or bunch up my fingers when I'm trying to type, leaving a big mess of whatever the hell I just typed on screen. Oh, and not being able to express my tone properly or convey my emotions. Yeah, that's definitely superhuman prowess. Or how about the uncontrollable meltdowns that mar my childhood, or the fact that I can't go to loud concerts anymore? Or when I'm snuggling with my boyfriend and his beard slightly touches my skin, it becomes so incredibly itchy. Yippee! Thanks, autism! People sometimes say that autism is just a different way of thinking, or it's not a mental illness at all, or autism doesn't need a cure. Autism sucks, man. It's not all rainbows and sparkles and special interests. It's weird looks from people around you, constant apologies, spitting on your screen involuntarily, people thinking that you're angry or rude when you're really just trying to talk, embarrassment, blowing interviews and job opportunities, not being able to communicate your thoughts, constantly worrying that you're going to come off as rude. But that is for another day. In conclusion, don't over-exaggerate symptoms. Write autistic traits from a neurodivergent point of view first. Put motivation behind autistic symptoms. Don't infantilize the character. Don't copy and paste the symptoms of autism from a textbook or Google. Don't put every symptom of autism inside one already overwhelmed autistic brain. Don't make the entire character's purpose or personality autism. Avoid the secret genius trope. I'm flattered, but it's getting old. The best autistic characters are often written without autism in mind. It's not that hard to write an autistic character. Just put the character before their autism. Their autism can be part of their character, sure, but it's more of a spice that you can add on top of their dialogue, movements, motivation, interests, actions. Overall, just make us entertaining and not cringe, and we won't judge you, because the autistic community latches onto autistic icons pretty quickly, even if they aren't autistic. It actually really isn't that hard to please us. If you make a character cool and interesting, we will very likely love it.